I think pretty much. Most people in the room here, that's not new news, but again, it's getting some attention. And with that, we're going to talk about also why we're here. Mark Hanson from First Children's Finance, who is one of the leading advocates in this area.
Good evening. Thank you. Once again, Mark Hanson. I work with First Children's Finance. I am their economic development consultant. And I've been in economic development for 25 years. And about 5 years ago, child care came to my doorstep and I said, this is not my issue. I do economic development. And I am finding that it is more and more an issue of economic development, to the point that First Children's Finance last July hired me as their first economic development consultant because it's such an important issue with child care. What you're going to see a little bit now is a kind of a broken record. You saw a little bit from the video. You're going to hear more from me of why we're here. A lot of the providers that are here or anybody that's in the field has seen this story before, but for those who haven't been part of this story, I want to bring them up to speed of why we're here today, go through a little bit of facts and figures, go through a little bit of what First Children's Finance does, and then I think I'm presenting a couple more times on creating and starting your own business, and then the final piece will be the different types of child care opportunities there are. Oh, I've got control, thanks. In your packet, you were given a small little representation of this county, and I have a one-page demographic of this. Essentially, as you saw, what are the statistics for the state? Well, these are the statistics for Kanabec County. So specifically within each city, you can see what exists. For the whole county, there's 2 centers at the time we did this study. There's 36 providers, and what that ends up being is, even though we have 36 providers and 2 centers, there's still a shortage of approximately 334 slots. Now this is just using demographics. This might not be a perfect number, but let's just say it's even half of that. We're still 160 slots short. So that's really why we're talking today, because those 160 slots represent children of parents who are working. And that's really kind of the end game of the child care crisis, is people are not able to work because they cannot find child care. Just like that news reporter said, she waited almost a year to find a slot, so that's not uncommon. So what does First Children's Finance do? We essentially have 3 parts that we work on. First of all, we work with legislation. We work with Department of Human Services. We work with our legislators to find what is a better way to provide this service. As you heard them talking about, it's a broken system. Well, if it is broken, then what's the fix? So I'll let you know that our state director has been in front of our legislators, has been in front of DHS a lot over the past few months, trying to find out how do we make this better. The second part that First Children's Finance does is we work with communities. We are currently working with Kanabec County on a process of finding out, what can we do here? How can we solve this issue? What are the issues? What are the problems? What's the inventory? Is there any available land, et cetera, et cetera? So we're in the middle of that process. I believe we're at meeting number 3 coming up. Is that correct? Maybe. Okay, meeting 4 or 5. But that's just discovery. We're just in discovery phase. We're still not into the next phase, which is, what are the action plan? And that is kind of our third level, is working with providers. We work with family child care. We work with centers. And then myself with economic development, I really work with financing, creating a business plan, working with the banks, working with the cities to see, is there any incentives? Is there any way we can help that provider open up their business with a lower cost? What's the impact of child care? I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, just so you just understand the basic costs involved. Essentially, right now, the industry is about an $883 million industry, which has a $900 million spillover. That's really because almost every dollar that you're spending here goes to educating the children, educating them, getting people working, paying the employees of the center, et cetera, et cetera. This one here was kind of astounding to me when I got this. 24% of parents said they withdrew from the workforce or declined employment due to childcare. 24%. That's 1 in 4 people that are working said, either I'm not going to work or I'm going to cut my work back just because of childcare. And just some of the stats that we've done as we've gone throughout the state. This one was done in Roseau County, just like we're doing one here in Kanabec County. This is some stats that came up because of childcare. What has happened in your workload in the past 12 months? 35% said there was tardy. 52% said they were inability to work. Absent from work, 50%. And inability to work different shifts, 47%. Those are big numbers. I mean, those are affecting families greatly. Especially if someone does need extra money to pay for the child care, they can't work extra hours because they can't have it. So just as a statement here, not having good child care is a major consideration for myself and my wife to withdraw from the workforce. And I know we have people from the Workforce Center here. I mean, that's a big deal because we know there's a worker shortage. So this is obviously one of the fixes. If we had more child care, would we have more workers, and would there be a less need for workers for our employers? The parent dilemma, you heard a little bit of that earlier. Can't read this, but essentially just what are the thoughts that are involved in becoming a worker and or paying for child care. The individual in the video pretty much explained it. That cost too much to go to child care, so I decided not to work. Right now, per statistics in 2018, 77% of families have all of the members of the family, the parents working, either single mom, single dad, or both. 77%. So that means if there's children in the family, 77% of them need child care. Just the stats on the expense for all the providers here, you know how much it is, but essentially, just to put it in perspective, just so you know, I'm 52 and I'm not thinking about these costs, but if I had to add an $18,000 expense to my life per year next year, I don't know what I'd do. I mean, that changes, that's more than my mortgage. And that's a big expense, and that's for an infant, and then you go on to toddler, $15,000 a year, and then you go on to, you know, the little older children, it's about $13,000 a year. Once again, that's almost a mortgage payment, if not more than a mortgage payment, so a great expense. Just talking about another area of what the costs are in Greater St. Cloud. We're not going to go into those details. So this is really why this group is here, is why does child care matter? First of all, to me, a working parent that has children, that is their number one concern. If their child is well taken care of and their child is not ill, that they are happy they can go to work and they can perform the job well. If those other two things aren't good, their child is sick or they're dropping them off at a place they're not happy with, they're probably not going to be the best performers. The next piece is, if you talk with Parent Aware, the big thing about child care is quality care. If we're bringing our children to a center and they're getting good education, they're getting socialized, they're getting taught the culture, then we're now creating a new workforce for the future versus, you know, the past. I'll tell you, my past is you sat in front of a VCR tape and you're cared for. You know, that was just the norm, and that is not the norm anymore. The expectations are much higher. We expect our children to come out of a child care center and they go right into kindergarten, ready for kindergarten. And then the last one is really that return on investment is our children are coming in better educated, higher chance for success in school, et cetera, which then creates a better community. Now this goes back to the child care centers themselves to learn a little bit more about that, the business model. Staffing of a child care center is 70% of the cost on average. Paying for the facility is 20%, and then the food is 5%. So that leaves 5% left over for profit. And this is not a scare tactic. This is the real deal. My job when I'm working with an individual is to study these numbers and how can we make that facility's cost down to 19% or 18%, just so you have a little bit more left over per month than 5%. So this is pretty common. And as I said earlier, also very common is the staff. They're not your highest paid staff. So this 70% is also keeping the staff wages very lean to make sure you can at least make your 5%. Once again, this is the full dilemma out there for any provider. You know, is it going to be profitable? Are you going to have access to your quality teachers or caregivers? And then are you going to be able to provide the quality that your parents are looking for? Just some general expenses of a center. I'm not going to go through that in great detail, but just to show you that, you know, there's also a different kind of expense level for families. A family child care is usually one person in their home, and they're running the whole show. They're the HR director, they're the accountant, they're the cleaner, they're all the above. And these are all just basic expenses that they have for their home: food and transportation, activities and supplies, phone, all those type of things. Okay, that leads up to the revenue each year is about $50,000. With all those hats they're wearing, they're making $24,000 a year. And that's not 40 hours a week. Probably closer to 55 hours a week. Oh, just stopped. Was that the end? Okay. So essentially, that's why we're here today, to really talk about what's the need in this area. We're talking about our centers and what does it cost for the centers to run and what their dilemma is, and then also for the family providers and what their dilemma is. And I'll talk later about starting a new business and also the different types of child care businesses there are. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to, as I was listening to the beginning of his presentation, First Children's Finance has been a tremendous help to us in Kanabec County. There is a group that's been organized, and Child Care Capacity Builders, do I get that right? Right? Child Care Capacity Builders, CCCB, okay, of which a representative from Children's Finance has led that for us. And he talked about that we're in the discovery stages. I kind of want to challenge that a little bit. We're active. Members of this group have approached the school, continuing ed, to increase after school-aged programs for the summer. And we're actively trying to secure that. That's part of the process. We're working on increasing the child slots through a not an out-of-home center that we're working on a project, and we're a little past the discovery stage in that. We're actively going into that, forward. We've talked about getting scholarship opportunities available and working with that resource page that's in your booklet there as one of the things of trying to develop more opportunities for the child care providers, both from an education point of view and from a resource point of view, and that's coming out of this group. So, and I think I'm missing one of the other. There was 4 strategic things we were doing, but I think I'm missing one of those. So we're past discovery. We're active. So with that, we're going to go into our first panel. So if I can call the panelists up. Okay. Julie. Minnesota Association of Child Care Professionals and Cozy Kids Licensed Home. Pam Mattson, We Care. Mark, again, and Katie Heacock from Kanabec County Family Services. I think we're missing. We're missing. Okay. This panel, the focus of this panel is the changing face of childcare. And I believe each of the panelists has got comments and that they're going to make, and then it's going to be open for questions. So, Mark, being you, do you want to start it off?
You're fine? Good? Well, like I said earlier, my job has been economic development for 20-some years. It's hard to say that, but I've been doing this for 25 years. In the past 5 years, the biggest concentration of my time has been childcare and or a business that needs help with childcare. My first project started in New York Mills with the Lund Boat Company saying we're losing our staff and they're not coming back. And then I also heard from Kenny's Candies or Tuffy's Foods in Perham that said the same thing. They said we're 500 people short and we're losing people and they're not coming back, and they're finding one issue with childcare. So the economic development side that I've been working on is really trying to find the most affordable ways of entry into the business. How do we get individuals into a center or a retrofit, or if you may have heard of a pod model, and may talk about that a little bit later, but essentially my job has been to really learn the ins and outs of the financing, of the incentives, and really number one is, what do banks want to see? You know, what makes a bank smile? And once the bank is happy, that's the first hurdle. And then the final piece is really looking at cities, counties, and regions of what incentives are offered. What can you gift? What free can we get to try to make that 20% facility cost be 19 or 18 or 17? So that's really what we've been working on in First Children's Finance with economic development, is that part.
I believe Julie is not here, so I am going to go next. I'm Pam Mattson. Good evening. I'm very honored to have been asked to be a member of the EDA Conference Planning Committee this past year, and also to present tonight. So thank you all for coming. Childcare has been a topic that's been very dear to my heart. I've been passionate about this for like 28 years that I've been in childcare. I've also loved children even when I was a child. I loved being with children and around children. Along with being passionate about children, I enjoy using humor. Children and humor go hand in hand. I believe humor is helpful when working through challenging moments. I also believe in the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I find truth in these words because children need consistency. And as all of our fellow child care providers out here tonight, we know that being longevity, that we have consistency. In the past month, I was encouraged when I learned that committee shared my feelings and concerns about child care in our community. I was excited when they wanted to know more about child care and the need for additional child care in our community and our state. We discussed the shortage of child care, the demand for quality child care, what could be done to support that demand, where will the children be if the current trend of family child care providers continue to decrease or become non-extinct. I explained to the committee that the trend of decreasing family child care providers is likely to continue with the new rules, requirements, and the statutes for licensing family child care provider, and in hopes Julie was going to present on that. So listen carefully when she explains that. People like Julie are very important because they are out there trying to make the voice of the provider heard. I feel we need to have our community take an interest, listen, and support our voice. I would like to share my analogy of a family child care provider and a local farmer. I fit the position as that I'm a child care provider and my husband has been a farmer. so I feel that I can share this. Both work alone or may have a helper, are in a caring profession. They work long hours, they feed, clean, maintain the books and finances, and abide by the rules that his or her trade. Independent workers have their own environment, and that is conducive in doing their business. We must have communication skills, a business plan, and be able to meet confrontation when they arise.
You don't like confrontation?
I don't like confrontation.
Okay,
Yeah, so, got it. Once you have a business plan developed and in place, you are able to look at it objectively when making decisions. You use it to determine the number of children you are able to care for, having an environment conducive for the children, and you're able to earn a decent wage within the losses and the gains. Like other businesses, providers have their busy and slow times. An example of this is having children leave your care due to loss of job, change in rescheduling, relocating. This leaves an open spot in your child care and a loss of wage. You may have an open spot bear with me here. You may have an open spot and a lower income for possibly a month to even a year. I've talked to providers where they haven't got the right call or it just doesn't work. As I mentioned, a farmer has animals that become sick, and then they're faced with having to replace that animal, but the farmer not always has the financial means to do so, so he will need to do without that income until the timing is right and he can replace them. Child care providers and farmers cannot have a sale like a retail store can to raise businesses and to create more income. Providers have their set rates and number of children as farmers know the amount of animals that the environment is able to accommodate. Both are valuable and important businesses to our community and country. Can you hear me okay? Because I feel like I echo back here. Okay. Not everyone can or wants to do either of these professions, but both are needed and valuable. Thankfully, we have our calling and talents. We are blessed that some people are passionate and gifted in the area of caring for children, agriculture, and animals, while others have passion to work in other occupations. To be successful in a caring occupation, it takes compassion. It takes love, dedication, and hard work. Currently, our community consists of approximately 23 in-home licensed providers and one center covering the Mora, Braham, Graston, and Ogilvie area. Each licensed provider may choose their license capacity they would like to operate under. Each one is different in the number of infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and school-aged children you may have at one time. When I became a licensed provider 28 years ago, there was roughly around 45 home providers. Tonight, I'm very pleased to see so many of our licensed child care providers here, as well as representation from other professions in our community that care for children, all of which share a common goal: caring and teaching young children. All offer a unique connection through their care, needs, and support for parents. Each provider needs to run their business by having a written agreement or a contract, so it is clear for parents to understand their financial responsibilities. Providers also must have a policy outlined so parents understand their responsibilities in communicating with the providers about the sick days, vacation days, and any other agreements made prior to their child care enrollment. And that's where Katie said, I don't like confrontation. Right. Right. This is a concrete and visual way to eliminate misunderstanding, conflict, or unnecessary confrontation. Children are our most precious gifts that God has given us. It is difficult to put a dollar amount or something this precious, but providers need to make a living also, so they need to be compensated for their services. In the child care profession, communication and confrontation are the most common problems. It is heartbreaking when usually the problem becomes very personal and sensitive. Providers need to acknowledge they are business and professional people just as any other business owner. A child care provider's day consists of constant surveillance, interaction and conversation, answering questions, demands, meeting with each individual's needs, comforting with hugs, snuggles, wiping noses and tears, changing diapers, being on alert for possible illness coming on, focusing on their developmental, educational needs, offering different learning experiences, social development, helping children to interact and play well with others, communication with parents and guardians, documentation, daily paperwork of attendance, the food program charting, cleaning and safety checks for the child care environment, and making it an enjoyable day for children and adults. So you can see our day is not very busy. Providers must keep up with the required training for their licensing. Keeping track of paperwork consists of updates on children's information, crib checks, fire drills, and other information. Yearly, there is an unannounced visit from the county licensor to review your records, training, and environment. Also, if a provider is enrolled in the food and nutrition program, there is a daily paperwork and 3 unannounced visits from your food representative. Parents need to acknowledge that licensed child care providers and others in this field are providing a service which needs to be respected and paid what they are worth. Parents and people in the community need to have an understanding that child care providers offer a service of caring for children in a safe, affordable, and manageable environment works for everyone involved. When the parent goes to enroll their child, as we've seen on that little clip too, I thought was very interesting. Parents need to consider the many needs and options for the best care for their child. They have to ask themselves, does my child have any special needs? Does my child have a type of personality that they will adapt well to change? Will my child be more successful and flourish in a large or a small setting? Would a center or an in-home child care setting work? Can my child handle being with 8 to 10 children or more? Or would family child care with a small number of children be better? Or do I need to look for private care? Parents also need to consider the time of operation of the care facility. Is the location convenient, close to work, or will the parent drive to find that right setting for their child? Would a busy or a calm environment be more fitting? A small or a large play area? Parents or guardians need to feel comfortable in communicating with the provider. And I think all the providers would say that is our most concern, is to have our parents be able to communicate with us. Currently, our community is experiencing a shortage of options for infants, toddlers, preschool age, and summer care for school-age children. And Doyle alluded to that. If quality childcare and availability is not an option, parent, guardians do not have a choice to place their child or children in care. What are they to do? What happens to the child? How can they go to their employment and efficiently do their work without worry or concern about their child? Many times they are faced with making changes and choices that are not always best for their family or lifestyle. And she alluded to that on the video, that she had to quit her job and stay home, which is sometimes hard. We all need to work together for the concerns and needs of the children. They are our focus, our future, and the future is dependent upon them. We need to get our priorities balanced. Care needs to come from a compassionate, warm, nurturing, vested person that loves being with children, and most of all, continuing of care. Continuity of care, I remember going to a training and being stressed that continuity of care is so important so that this child does not move from child care homes to different homes to centers, that they're consistent. When dealing with small children, we need to consider what is best for them and their families. We need to make planful choices so we can be confident their needs will be met with change. What can we as individuals and community do? We can become involved by taking an interest in how we as a community can provide quality child care. Currently, the EDA committee is looking into how to promote more licensed family child care, providers offering more center capacity, and a school-age summer care program. How can we make it happen? We can show interest in the child care options, make a suggestion, or serve on a committee. We can explore ideas on how we can utilize current spaces to expand services. There are many options to explore for child and children to be cared for. We will consider centers, summer school age care, and promote interest in the family child care in our community. The life of our young child and children count. They are our future. Who are these children? They are our own, adopted, foster, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, children of our friends and neighbors, co-workers, children we see on the street and in restaurants and social gatherings. We have a responsibility to all of these children. Recognition and appreciation is especially important when it comes to caring for our young children. I want to thank all of you for your part in the caring of children, for your support and interest in providing care for our children in our community, for advocating, being concerned, and making changes to increase availability of quality child care in our community. A big thank you from me and all the child care providers, home providers, and businesses owners who support us and the EDA. Providers, parents, and children need this village. We have a voice on our, and to have a voice on our behalf. Everyone pulling together in support, our vision is what we will bring positive results for our children.
Mark, you read my mind. Thank you. Is it on? All right, so hello everybody. My name is Katie Heacock. I've worked for Kanabec County Family Services for the last 18 years. I spent 18 years of that doing licensing, so hello family child care providers. I miss you. I recently became the adult services supervisor, so I now supervise the licensor that you now have. So no worries. Things will be great. It'll be fine, okay? We have transitions. It's okay. Okay. Change is good. Yes, absolutely. And so as I was kind of sitting here thinking about Pam and what she talked about, the word choices came to me a lot, right? Choices. We all need to have choices in our life, right? And right now, I think the things that kind of that I focus on are that parents don't have a lot of choices for childcare in our community here. So my presentation today is kind of focusing on what some of those choices could look like. So this is maybe not new news to some of you, but we're going to talk about some of those things that maybe could happen in our community. And so maybe when we talk about what those things might look like, that's maybe where we can start having some conversations about where to grow from here. So that's kind of what the focus of today is going to be. So let's see if we can get this to work. Perfect. Okay. So when we look at childcare, I want to do just a brief synopsis of what things have looked like. So we start out looking like in the 1980s, because that's kind of when I remember childcare stuff, okay? So we look at things like latchkey kids. That terminology was used a lot in the 1980s. And that's also when the rules started for family child care providers. So all those rules that they have to follow started in the 1980s. They've been expanded on. So then we moved to the 1990s, and then we really saw a sharp increase in preschool enrollment in the 1990s. We also saw a large increase in child care center development. So that was kind of the focus of the 1990s. And then we move into the 21st century, and now we have things like all-day preschool being offered in the schools. We have things like ooh, I'm having a hard time reading this. Please don't tell me I need bifocals. I really don't want them. So we have parents working multiple shifts, right? So not everybody has that Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 job. My husband alone has a 7-day every 2 weeks, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. job, right? So it's a little different to try and find childcare for 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., right? A lot of other people have shifts into the evenings, overnight shifts. So we have a lot of those different types of dynamics. We also focus on the increased need for part-time on-call care. When I visit providers, I would see a lot of their enrollment sheets would be growing and growing and growing and growing every year, right? Because it's not the same kids every day that are coming into childcare. We have a lot of part-time kids, and so we have these lists of enrollment that are just pages and pages long, because we have more people having those different shifts, and part-time is such a need for us. We also have this focus where we have grandparents who are continuing to be employed. I think right now I heard the kind of thing is that we have 4 different generations of people in the workforce right now. Does that sound about right for people? 4 different generations? And I think that's challenging. When I grew up, we had, my grandparents were home. So if we needed daycare, we went to grandma's house, right? But now grandparents are working. I can't call on my mom to come watch my kids, right? Because now she's working. So those are just some of the brief look at childcare. What we see in Kanabec County is that in 2001, when I started, we averaged about 45 family childcare providers. Right now, we have about 27. I know the number has maybe decreased just a little bit here. But when I wrote this, it was 27. So that happens, right? 1 month. Yeah, 2 in 1 month. So the next thing is talking about what common capacities are in family childcare. So we know that the first year that a provider is licensed, they're limited to 10 children total. But guess what? It's it's kind of hard to get to that 10 because you have to make sure that you don't have more than 6 kids under school age, and of that you can't have more than 3 infants and toddlers, and of that you can't have more than 2 infants, right? So that really limits the number of kids that you can take care of. Beyond that, after your first year that you're licensed, you can move to a different class of license. This is where it gets completely confusing, and I'm not going to go through all of it here. But you can move to a different class where you can take care of more kids, but then there's maybe some different numbers of kids that you can take care of for infants and toddlers. One of the options is to go for a C3 license, but in order to do that, you have to have a second adult caregiver to be able to take 14 children. So lots of different challenges within those ratios as well. So what are some of those options that we can do when capacity can't be met? Because we know that not everybody has a birthday right at the right time in order for us to enroll a new child. So of course, providers could look at changing their license class. So maybe moving from that class A to a class C1, somewhere in there, right? If a provider has been licensed for 6 months or more, we can move that license class up if they've had additional training. So rather than waiting that first year, we can do that at 6 months if they have additional training. Or if they've had certification or licensure, like some child development degrees, pre-K, K through 6 teaching, 6 months experience as a teacher in a center. Those are different options that we can look at to change that class. Beyond that, we can also look at doing variances. This has been kind of a contentious, might be a good word, a contentious thing around the state here because every county is able to do variances as they choose right now. So there are some counties that say, nope, we're not gonna do variances at all. We have not taken that stance. We have issued quite a few variances. But the things that we look for are that it's a short-term thing, and it's something that's going to resolve itself. If it's something that doesn't really resolve itself until like 3 years from now, I'm not sure that that's short-term, but we've considered like a year to be short-term for us. So just know that we try to be flexible. We look at them on an individual basis. I will point out that DHS is currently considering taking on the approval of variances, which may change how things look in the future for variances. So just some additional family child care models. So those are what we traditionally see when we license family child care. There's some other options that I want to talk about. So here's where we get to those choices, right? So some other options, we have some specialized infant toddler licenses that in my 18 years, I have never seen anybody use. I would love to see it, but I understand that there's limitations. So you can have more infants and toddlers with this type of a license, but guess what? Your total capacity decreases to about 5 or 6. If you have 2 adults, you can have no more than 9 kids. So we get back to what Mark was saying when we talk about the profitability of childcare, right? Your overhead kind of increases. You have less revenue maybe because you have less children, and then it's hard to get to that, even that 5% at that point. Okay. Some other options. So, sorry, super tiny here, guys. I'll walk you through it. So the first option so these are all considered special family child cares. And so the first option is that the license holder can provide care in a home other than their own. So we have a couple situations where this happens in Kanabec County. It's an option. Again, it increases overhead for the provider because then they're having to make other financial arrangements for that space. The second option is employer childcare. We also have experience with this in Kanabec County as well, where an employer starts a childcare for their employees. Think about these as one of those options that our community could really look at introducing some more of as well. Churches and religious organizations have the option to hold a family childcare license as well. So do community collaborative providers. Okay. Okay, are we better? Ooh, wonderful. Okay, so the next one is a community collaborative provider. And so that is where a provider participates in a child care arrangement through a community action council. Anybody know who that is for us? Lakes and Pines, right? Okay, so that would have to be a collaborative agreement with Lakes and Pines. Another option is that we can have family child cares located in a commercial space. There's some extra licensing regulations that I don't really want to get into here, but just know that that is an option as well. Another one is that a not-for-profit agency could provide care in a residential setting as long as they maintain contracts with community employers or other community organizations. So another kind of different option that we can look at, again, there's some different licensing regulations with that as well. But interestingly enough, not-for-profit agency models can be granted a variance to allow up to 5 more children above the total capacity of 14 during transition periods if it's related to the work schedules of parents. So when you think about like those different shifts of people coming in, that's when you can really look at doing that type of variance for that not-for-profit agency. The last one up there is the 2 or more licenses under one roof. And this is kind of getting some new buzz. Mark, are you going to be talking more about this later on? Maybe? Okay. Well, we'll make sure that it gets covered. Okay. So we don't have any of these currently, but it's getting a lot of buzz around the state right now. Because really, I think it looks at decreasing that overhead cost for providers when they can share one space. So if you have 2 providers that can share one space, it decreases their cost. The thing with this is that each provider has to demonstrate that they can provide their own care within that setting. So they can't share supervision, they can't share facilities, so there's some limitations there, but it's really getting some buzz. There's some different, the last thing on the bottom there with the gray area is that there's some variances that can be considered by DHS to allow some providers of care to operate in different spaces. And so if anybody is ever interested in looking into any of these kinds of things, I would be more than willing to have conversations with you, and then maybe being that facilitator with DHS. So come find me if that looks like a good choice for you. All right, so moving on. Childcare centers. I used to work in childcare centers, so I have a little bit of knowledge with this, but they are licensed directly by DHS. And typically what we see is like a traditional childcare center or a preschool program, that type of thing. Some of the other options, though, for childcare center licensing include things like drop-in programs and the school-age care programs. And some of those drop-in programs and those school-age care programs, they have to be licensed as a center, but they're exempt from some of the licensing requirements just because of the nature of the type of program they are. So these you would have to go directly through DHS to be licensed for. So then I want to briefly touch that there are a certain number of programs that are exempt from licensing standards. And so I think it's worth it to point it out just because we have choices then. And again, oh, super tiny. It's way bigger on my screen, or my slides here. Sorry about that. The first option that we have is that you don't have to be licensed if you are providing childcare to a related individual. Related to us has a very specific definition. It can't be your third cousin twice removed, okay? So we have some very limiting factors on who's related. But if you care for only children that are related to you, you don't have to be licensed. Another option is that you can provide care for one unrelated family and not have a license then. Programs that are operated by public schools for kids that are 33 months and older do not have to be licensed. And programs that operate for less than 3 hours a day while a parent is in the same building doesn't have to be licensed either. So think about some of those employers that maybe would be able to provide some after-school care. Maybe they can be open for the 3 hours after school in order for parents to remain at work. Those types of things wouldn't necessarily have to be licensed. Okay. So a couple more here. Oh man, these really got tiny too. Sorry about that. So recreation programs that are operated by park and rec boards don't have to be licensed. Same thing if they're operated by a school, by a YMCA or a JCC. Ooh, I had to look this one up. It was a new acronym for me. So anybody got it? Anybody know what a JCC is? Oh, crickets, man. It's a Jewish community center, and I had no clue what that was, but I looked it up, so now we all know. Okay. So programs like scouting, 4-H, Boys and Girls Clubs, those don't have to be licensed either. Non-residential programs provided for a total of less than 30 days in any 12-month period don't need to be licensed. Now, the intent can't be that they, after those 30 days would then become licensed. The intent really has to be that they only provide care for 30 days or less in a year. And then programs that are operated by a nonprofit that serve K through 12 youth also don't need to have a license. Again, a lot more, they have some things that you have to follow for that as well, like having a director or a supervisor, getting written consent, and making sure that parents know that it's not a licensed facility. So when we look at all those options that are available, how do we take action here? So, you know, in Kanabec County, what we've done back in 2008, we understood that childcare was decreasing back then. So we made sure that our county board was aware of that. The county board reduced the annual licensing fee, so there's a little bit of a discount in order to get to renew your license, as well as we completely eliminated the fees if you provide or agree to provide 18 hours or more a week of non-standard hour care. So we were looking at that beyond Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So if you provided some evenings, some weekend care, that kind of thing, we completely eliminated the licensing fees as an incentive to be able to expand some childcare. We also look at those variances, like I mentioned before, again, based on individual provider needs, and we can't ever go over the capacity of 14. So I don't want to get your hopes up that all of a sudden Katie's going to start doing variances for like 30 kids, because it's not going to happen. And then we've also simplified the initial licensing process. We wanted to make sure that for anybody looking at becoming licensed in Kanabec County, that you would have access to orientation pretty much immediately. So we now provide that orientation over email. It's like a PowerPoint presentation that a person reviews, and then they answer some questions and return that to us as their orientation. So no longer do they have to come into the office to meet with us or anything like that. So it's worked really well for us. It's kind of that on-demand training and education then. Okay. And then new news. So just today, hot off the press, DHS has issued a new document called Becoming a Family Child Care Provider. So many of you are existing, but it's still really good information to have. So you might want to write this down. You can do a Google search for DHS 8013. So DHS 8013, and that's the new document that just got published today for family child care. Okay? So let's move forward, and we'll talk about what parents and providers can do. Honestly, a lot of it comes down to communication, right? Parents need to be communicating their schedules. Providers need to be communicating their availability. You know, we talk about sharing shifts. We talk about, well, does this family need care on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and another family needs Tuesday, Thursday? So it's really that communication and that flexibility there. We talk about family, friends, and neighbors when we think about being able to extend the availability of the family child care provider. So one of the situations that really comes to my mind, Pam, do you mind if we use this example? So was it last year, 2 years ago? 2 years ago, something like that. We had 6 prego moms in that needed care that already had siblings in childcare at Pam's house, and so we tried to figure out what we could do with schedule-wise variances, whatnot. But really, it comes down to does one of the parents have a Friday off, and maybe they can take another one of the infants, because, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Who has what day off during the week and who can take an extra kid, because we just can't do those variances over 14 kids. Talking about, volunteering, parents can certainly help volunteer at child cares. I would love to have, like, if a parent had a day off, wouldn't it be great to have them come in and be a trained second caregiver, right, as a volunteer, so that you could have that higher capacity of 14 and operate at that? Logistically, it may not happen, but it's a dream. We can all have dreams, right? Does a parent have a particular talent with paperwork or prepping art activities to take some of that time so that the provider doesn't have to take their time to do that kind of thing? And encouraging others to become licensed. I will tell you that the very best marketing tool that we have is word of mouth. Absolutely, the people who become interested in childcare and who follow the licensing process are those that somebody else has said, hey, I think you would make a really great provider. How about you think about becoming a licensed provider? It works when you have 6 pregnant moms and maybe one of them decides to become a childcare provider then at that time. But honestly, that word of mouth recruitment is so important. And then I wanted to focus a little bit on what employers can do. And I think the biggest thing that I can think of there is family-centered culture. What can businesses do? What can employers do to create that family-centered culture in their work environment? Number one, parents need to feel supported with childcare. Can you embrace some flexible work scheduling options? Can employees work 40 hours a week and get their job done? It doesn't have to be Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. Maybe they have some flexibility with the hours that they can work. Do you set predictable schedules at work? It's really difficult to arrange childcare when you have a different schedule every week. Providers find it difficult to fit that into their schedules, right? Do you always have a weekly meeting? Does it have a set beginning time and a set ending time? Because if it doesn't, it's really hard to arrange family childcare or any type of childcare arrangement if you don't have that set time. Are your meetings scheduled too early or too late, right? Do we have them before 9 o'clock in the morning? Do we have them after 4 o'clock in the afternoon? That makes it difficult for parents who have childcare that they need to get to. Do you have an option that parents can work from home sometimes, especially when we deal with weather and illnesses and that kind of thing? Have you launched a workplace support group where parents can network? I think that's one of the biggest things that I hear is that parents need to talk with other parents, right? That's that support system. How can we help them network with their coworkers? Make sure you have some management policies so that working parents don't get those scornful glances when it's like, oh, they went home again. They had to go pick up their sick child again. We don't want that kind of a that kind of a culture within our businesses if we're trying to support a family-centered culture. Be your employee's backup, right? Is there a way that your business can look at some of these other creative options and help with the childcare shortage that we have? Do you want to become an in-house sponsored family childcare provider, an employer childcare provider? Or maybe if you don't have enough employees or enough interest just within your business, can you look at partnering with another business to sponsor another child care so that there's other options for employees. So those are kind of the options that I was thinking of as I thought about this. The last thing that I have for you is really what our community can do. We need to be looking at those financial resources for family child care providers. We have a good start with the handout that Doyle referenced earlier. We would like to make sure that every provider knows what financial resources are available to them, and that's kind of where we started with some of our work. And then honestly, spread the word. Tell everybody about the shortages that we're having, and encourage people to become licensed. We're not super scary, right? Oh no, I didn't get a response. No, we try to make the licensing process as simplified as we can, understanding that we have rules and regulations that we have to work with. So. Thank you. If you need anything else, my email is up there, and then our direct phone number is up there as well. So, what are we doing next? All right, wonderful.
Well, first of all, I got to apologize. I was following the order, and I realized it's out of order, and I thought I was just doing introductions. I didn't even go through my presentation at all. So I apologize. So, Mark, if you could start it up. Just like Katie's, these numbers are really tiny. I'm not really want you to look at the tiny numbers, but I'm going to give you the scope of what my job is, First Children's job is, and really what the scope of the focus of someone that looking at starting up a new child care center should be. So with that, I'm going to go through the details. This is an actual project. I've removed the names as best I could. This project started in July 14th, 2019. We are still not ready to build yet. Just to give you an example of the time and the work it goes into planning for a large center. So with that, huge numbers, you can't see these, and I can't see them either. If you can, follow along. I know them by heart because I created this document, so I've adjusted it about 37 times. Essentially, it comes down to two pieces of information. What's it going to cost to build it, and who's going to pay for it? Basically, the sources and uses. First of all, how much is it going to cost to build this facility? The facility itself, just alone, $1.6 million. And that's to hold 111 children. That's what they're going to be licensed for, $1.6 million. The next piece is there's a contingency because as buildings go up, there's not always exact numbers. So put a 10% contingency on top of that. Along with that, there's other costs. There's lawyer costs, there's architectural fees, there's purchasing of property, et cetera, et cetera. So the end cost of this project is $2.2 million. And that's just to build it. That's just to put a building with nothing inside. That's to create a parking lot. That is to make sure that it is an attractive facility. It's got a good location, et cetera. But that's an empty building. So the first point of attack is this. Do we have a participating bank? That is, in my concern, that is number one. Does a bank see this as cash flowing? Does a bank say, yes, this is a good investment for our bank? So then our job is this. How do we make the bank happy? The next piece is looking at a 504 guarantee program, which will bring in 40% of the project is guaranteed. But they're still going to scrutinize the project to make sure it cash flows, to make sure that everybody is guaranteeing the payback. So with that, that's the bank we're looking at paying 50%, 504 paying 40%. Who comes up with the last 10%? The potential buyer. If your math skills are good, 2.2 million, what does the buyer have to come up with? $220,000. Now, there's some caveats that some of this can be financed, but for the most part, that is cash. $220,000, 10% upfront to start this project. So when you look at why aren't we building new centers? Why aren't people coming forward and saying, boy, this is an easy to come up with $220,000 and pay all my staff at a low rate and then try to keep my rates low, et cetera, and also make the bank happy. This is our challenge. This has been a fun challenge for me, but this is, like I said, this is an actual project. So that's just the sources and uses. How much is it going to cost, and where's the money coming from? So what do we look at? We look at, okay, where are all the children coming from to make sure that when we do expand, do we have enough scope of mileage for people to travel to get to our facility? And we looked at it and we found out we are at about a 30-mile radius of kids coming into the center. 30-mile radius of kids coming into the center. So that means parents are driving and they'd be happy to drive to get a spot for this opportunity. So this is just some of the research we did. The next piece we looked at is, boy, I can't even read it myself. Oh, what is the going rate? So I'll just give you an example that the provider has a current rate that they give to their kiddos that they have now. They're going to have to increase that to be able to afford this new facility. Well, what's appropriate? So we looked at what the state statute says, here's what the costs are out there. So we have, that's not state statute, state demographics, excuse me. So here's what I'm charging now for the area. Here's the 25th percentile or the lowest quarter of what people charge. The 50th percentile or what the half people charge, and then 75 percentile. And what is that? What are those different rates and where can I fit? Where can I fit to still be affordable, but then to also be able to make money as a provider? I will let you know in this area, I know you all know what CCAP is. CCAP paid less than 25th percentile in this area. So they paid lower than the lowest quarter. So this provider said, I don't think I can even entertain taking CCAP for my new facility. And that's hard to hear because those individuals that are on the lower end of the income scale definitely need child care. They definitely need to get to work. But to say, we're going to build a 2.2 million facility, but you're not welcome because we can't afford to have you here. Not that they don't want them there, they just can't afford to have them there. So that was part of the debate. So we're looking at options for scholarships, et cetera, to still make sure that those children have a space, but that the provider still gets the full asking price. So we looked at these pieces. Where are the children coming from, and how much can we charge to try to pay for this new facility? The next thing we look at here is I'm sorry, I can't even read this myself. I might just have to pass. Oh, nope, I know what this is. So with that, the provider said one thing that was very important to her. I want to pay my staff more. So we looked at the average wage of the area, and every provider within her current facility, even her teacher, was making way less than the average wage in the area. And we thought, well, what can we do to make that better? So we did some manipulation, made some changes, and added to that. So we made sure at least the one teacher is making a good wage. But the rest we said, let's just give them $1 an hour raise for every other staff member just to see where that fits. Well, still not one person went above the median wage for that area, even though we'd made that increase. But we had to stay there because that's where we can really cash flow this project. So that's what that spreadsheet is. Actually, all of her employees and what they are currently making, and then what we'd go up to if we were to add the new facility and make the change. The next piece is really where I feel First Children's Finance can be a great asset to any individual, any center that wants to try to be creative. We are able to go to a city, in which we did, and said, by the way, here's our situation. It's very expensive to build. We can't pay our staff very much. We have to keep our costs to our parents down so we can make sure that they can afford us. With that all being said, we lose money every single month, every single year. So we need your help. So here's what we did. We came in and said, by the way, could you give us tax abatement? Which basically says, by the way, if we were to build this building, we'd be paying another $13,000 a year in tax. Could you possibly gift that to us to help out with our expense? Also, another great advantage that we had with this project was the city owned the land where we were going to build the facility. We were kind of calculating with that because if that's the case, could the city gift us the land or give us a write-down? The current value of that land was $370,000 just for the raw land, no infrastructure, no water, no sewer. And we were going to ask for a write-down of $200,000. So we're looking for $13,000 a year plus a write-down of $200,000 for the land. And the reception was very warm. I'll say they were very happy. They understood the situation. Just like all of you are hearing today that there's a great need. How can the city help? The city was there to help. This meeting was, I believe, in November. We're still trying to find a bank that will say, yes, I want to play. Yes, I want to participate. After doing all the financials, after doing all the work, getting the city in to saying, yes, if you brought the project forward, we would entertain these things. So we're still, from last July, we're still working on it. It's still favorable. We're not getting no's, but we're not getting resounding yeses either. So let me see if there's another, there's not really another slide on that. So to close with that, what I really want to say is this, that first of all, what does it cost? Who's going to pay for it? And if they're going to pay for it, what are the other costs involved? And the number one is staff, making sure you have enough staff, that you're paying them enough to keep them, and then also that you're charging the right amount for the kiddos to make sure the parents can afford it. And along with that, my job is really to chase that 20% for the facility. Can I meet that 20%? And if it's 24%, we can't open, because then there's 1% left over. There's just no money left to scrape to make this business work. So that's what you see, all these numbers. This is one actual project, and we got this project down to where it'd be making $14,000 a year after all bills are paid for a $2.2 million project. As any banker will tell you, that's very skinny, but that's where we are. So thank you.
I don't know if it's safe for a bank to come up and follow this. Yeah. And actually, the 504 program that he talked about is the only way, generally the only way that you can get your equity contribution down to 10%. Almost always a bank will want 25% as the start. And the 504 program is one of the ways to get down to that. So as a technicality, that was the right way to do it. That is what I'm saying. From a programming note, Julie has a conflict and will be joining us by, I think by video, or we hope at 6:30. So her part of the program, that's her section, we're going to start after our dinner at 6:30 for her part of the program, okay? But we want to continue at this point with a Q&A, or a question and answer. So I'm going to encourage the audience, if you've got questions that have popped up at this point, I'll come around and kind of have to use the mic and ask the question of the panelists, okay? So if you've got questions now, start thinking about them. I'm going to start it out just a little bit, and as part of the capacity building group, one of the points that I think that I heard that there was a disconnect between the providers and the people in the group was the training availability, that there are programs out there for training. Correct? I'm trying to think of which of the presenters at that point were saying, we've got opportunities for them to meet their training, and they're not asking for them. That there's program dollars? Is that, yes, no? Yeah. Go.
If this one doesn't work, I'm really in trouble, but I can use my outside voice. What you were talking about, Doyle, was at one of the meetings with the Child Care Aware was talking about that they do schedule trainings and sometimes they felt like the providers were not taking advantage of them, and they were free trainings. But how do you want me to answer this? I think I got put on the spot. I think from the provider's standpoint, sometimes trainings come up and we have conflicts, or it's not the training that we're looking for at that moment. So we're kind of balancing it, and it's just been in the past year or so that Child Care Aware and has been offering these trainings. Maybe it's been 2 years, Anne? 2 years? Yeah, and so I think on behalf of my fellow child care providers, I'm going to say that I think we're just catching on and we're trying, and it's not always fitting into our schedule. And I think once we were also faced with our trainings got changed on us of our requirement trainings. And the last, yes,
Are we going there, Pam?
Yes, we are.
Oh boy.
I thought I had our friend over here, but okay. So, okay, speaking for myself, that we were in the last couple of years looking at, and the training got a little switched around, and things that we needed, and it was a different format. And so I think some of us were just kind of catching up. And a lot of the providers I've talked with before said, you know, they've been trying to catch it online, the things that they need, and they've been watching. So I think that as Child Care Aware works with us a little bit more, we should probably be getting on the moving forward.
I think also with the trainings, with the required trainings that we need are not offered in the area. They're not offered in the area at a select cost. So, you know, free would be awesome, of course, but like all the required ones that we need aren't in this area. And if they are, they're not advertised good.
Hi, I'm Shelley. I work with Pine Technical and Community College in the Child Care Aware department. And I encourage you, if there is a training that you need and you are not finding, please give us a call. We will find that training for you. We have a lot of options available. We have virtual training available. There's different training organizations that we can set you up where the trainings are rather really inexpensive. They're $5 for 2 hours of training. So please, if you're out there and you need training, please give us a call. We would love to help you.
Here's a risk when you have somebody that's not in the profession trying to paraphrase, but I think I'll try. What I heard from the people on there is that if there is a need and there's more than one or two, if they can become aware of what that need is, they are flexible enough to schedule a training in the area. But somebody has to act as the coordinator and say, we need a class in blank, and then you contact them and they'll figure out a way to deliver it to you here. That's what I heard. The flexibility piece is the new piece. Okay? Did I paraphrase that correctly? Okay. So I want to start. Do we have any pressing questions at this point? Della.
So I think in Kanabec County, we started seeing a decrease before the state did. I I think a lot of people have been attributing it to some of the added regulations, the trainings, that kind of thing. But honestly, we started seeing the decrease in providers before those types of trends. And so, Mark, I don't know if you have more that you can say about that. Okay.
Della, right? Della? That was a good question because that's my first, when I looked into economic development, what's the real cause? What's going on here? I mean, it's everywhere. And I was working with one of the counties in my region, and I went to the president of the child care area, and they stated in the last 3 years, they went from 400 providers to 300 providers. That's a significant drop. And when she did a survey, essentially is the providers aren't making enough money. It's a stressful position, and there's jobs out there that pay better with benefits. So when you go and I'll tell you that we've heard many figures, but the figure I repeat is an average of $8.63 an hour for a family child care provider working more than 40 hours and no benefits can go across the street and work at Holiday gas station and get $12 an hour with some sort of benefits. There's a choice. When you talk about choices, there's a choice. And then you're going to add on the next piece is the regulations and the cost of entry into the business. To start a child care is not free. There is an expense to entry. So if you're trying to say, I want to start my own business, but I need $20,000 of startup costs to do this or put a fence up or all these things and say, or I can just go to work tomorrow and have no expense. So those are some of the anecdotes. Of course, it's more contrived than that, but that's just some of the things that I have found along with regulations. But this is a workers' market, and people they're paying well, and childcare providing is not your high-paying job. So that's part of the issue there, and those in the room know that. Yes, Stella.
So does daycare fall under DHS, and what has DHS been doing to assist with this issue? If I have the right answer.
I'm not the right one to answer that. I'll say I know DHS in my world for First Children's Finance, they help us to help do this work, but as far as the provider, I don't really deal with the provider directly.
I would say that the role of DHS is more oversight when it comes to licensed providers and not necessarily looking at, they understand that there's a shortage and an issue, and I think they're trying to look at that, but I don't know that their role is really to come up with a solution.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. That's a big yes, but it's a tiny help. I will tell you that just in my position is brand new last July. First Children's Finance is one of the entities throughout the state that are working on this throughout the whole state. 2 years ago, we were at basically 3 employees, now we're at 10. And we're someone stationed in the Detroit Lakes area, Bemidji area, Virginia, Owatonna, and Morris, that we are doing these kind of forums, this kind of work for all the areas. I am working with Eric Forsman in Duluth, and they brought forward $500,000. And I will tell you, that's a token. That's just a start. We need about $5 million just to get things rolling. But there's a lot of issues involved. It's a really good question, but First Children's Finance is out here. We got Parent Aware. Your initiative foundations throughout the entire state are really... Okay.
Can I have the members of...
No.
Can I have the members of the community child care capacity builders stand up. Here's your local group. This is what we're trying to do. Okay?
So this is, my name's Heidi with the EDA. So the CCB group is a new group that we formed. Many of us are here. The Kanabec County Child Care Capacity Builders. And we started this group back in October with help from First Children's Finance. And we have a group of about, is it 10 to 15 people who have been meeting monthly at the courthouse to come up with a strategic supply plan, is what it's called. So we have, the group has put together 4 main projects to try and help with this issue. And so the committee members, volunteers, staff like myself, Beth Thorpe from the city of Mora, Child Care Aware, who else? Many passionate people are working on this to try and do what we can in the economic development capacity, because no one else is helping, and so we're trying to help. And a lot of times we get the question, well, why are, like Mark kind of touched on this, why is the EDA working on this? You know, because it relates to workforce. And we know that, well, workforce development is a big part of economic development. So please reach out. We can, well, I'll have to ask the committee first if we can, if we can post their contact information somewhere, or if they'd be willing to, you know, take phone calls and do all that. But we're always looking for more members on that committee too. So if you want to be part of that committee, please let me know, and I'll let you know details of where to be every month. It's actually the second Wednesday. We meet the second Wednesday of every month at 1 p.m., right? That's what we came up with? Okay.
Okay. Any other pressing questions? We're gonna pick this up again after with Julie's presentation, and then we'll still have time for questions again. Food's ready. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm just wondering who's doing it right? You know, is this a nationwide problem? Who's doing it well? Should we look at other nations?
Wow.
It's nothing unique to Minnesota.
You heard Amy Klobuchar's comments that this is a national issue as well, and that's the need. What comes out of that type of item, though, is grants and money and competitive programs that have to demonstrate what their goals are, and that I don't know, though, that it addresses one of the core issues is the low pay part. I mean, why that is such a challenging question is because that's a societal value. It's right. It's what we value that at. So to come up with it's somebody else's issue. It's not. It's our issue, and it's really something that we have to deal with at a local level, right? So again, can we eat? The food's ready, and again, we want this time to be a social networking time as well. So grab your sandwich and then sit and visit with the people at your table, and we'll try and come together again at 6:30.